Welcome to part 3 of Python programming series. This is Ram Prasad Pujari. In today's session, we will look at Python functions. We will learn how to create new functions and how you can use them. In the previous session, in part 2, we looked at Python variables and data types. And in the very first session of Python programming series, we looked at Python programming environments such as IDLE and Jupyter Notebook. If you're very new to Python programming, I suggest you watch my previous videos before watching this one. Now, there are some built-in functions in Python, which some of them we are already familiar with. We have used them in our previous sessions. For example, print, type, len, max, input. These are called as built-in functions in Python. I have Python 3.8 and as per this version, when I installed, these many built-in functions are available. Similarly, the latest Python version is 3.11 and 3.11 may have some additional functions. So 3.8 has these built-in functions. And so let us say if you're working on some specific task, specific project, and if you want to create your own function, and if you don't find any function which is suitable to your work, then you can create your own. Now, what are the benefits of creating a function? Why functions are required? So, for example, if you want to, in your program, same set of statements, if you want to use it multiple times at multiple places in your program. So rather than copying and pasting all the codes, you can create the function once, and after that you can call them using a single line statement, and so that will reduce the size of the Python program. So that is one benefit of creating a function. And similarly, if you're working on a bigger task and if it has number of subtasks, so you can create a function for each subtask. So you can organize your work in a proper way, and you can isolate each of the subtasks because each subtask has a separate function. And so this way your implementation becomes easier. So I am at Jupyter Lab. So this is the Jupyter Notebook. And first we will see how a user-defined function is created, how you can create your own function in Python. So very first step is you need to define the function. So this is how you define. So you use a keyword called as def followed by the function name. So def is a reserved keyword, so make sure that this keyword is not used for any variable. So because that is already one of the we have seen in the last session, there are a number of reserved keywords in Python, and def is one among them, and followed by a function name. So each function should have a name, like print is a function and the print is the name of the function. And similarly, if you're creating your own function, you have to give a name to the function. Now there is the naming rule applies to this, and naming rule is similar to that of a variable. In the previous session we saw, when you want to give a name to the variable, you need to follow a naming rule. Now similarly here, there is a naming rule. You can't use any special characters except underscore, and it's also case sensitive. So this is the first line of function definition, followed by the statement what exactly you want to do, the task that you want to perform. These are the statements. And remember, this indentation is very important in Python. So this particular function is a very simple function. I am just printing the string. The string is Python function without any variable assignment. So very first step, is you need to define the function. So I'm defining it here. Then I will run this particular cell, and after that I can use this function. Now I'll be able to use this function or call this function. We say function call, and the name of the function here is my function. So I can just type the name of this function if I am calling it. So my function. So this is the name of a function. I am just calling this function, and I will run this. As you can see that when I call this function, this particular statement will be executed, and it will print this string. So this is the first step, and it's the simplest function that you can create. Now let us make it a little more complicated. Again, we will create one more function. Now in this case, as you can see here, I have given a different function name. The function name is linear equation, lin equation, LIN_EQN. So this particular function, what it does is it determines C, where C equal to 2x plus 3y. Star is a multiplication operator in Python. So this is the function name. Again, I am defining a function here, but in this case I will also pass some parameters to the function. X and y are called as input parameters, or you call it as input arguments. That means if you want to use this function, you also have to provide these values to x and y. X and y are also variables here, and these are the statements. There are two statements here. So this particular function will determine C from x and y using this equation. This is a linear equation, and after that it prints the value of C. So that is going to be the function. When you compare to the first function what we created, this particular function can pass to variables or arguments here. They are called as input arguments, x and y arguments. So let me now, I have defined this function. Now I want to use it in my program. Now remember, this function requires x and y value before you run this function, before you call this function. So you need to initialize these variables here. So what I'll do is, I need not use same x and y. What is important here is the variable value is required and not the exact name. I can use, let us say, instead of x and y, I can use a and b. I'm using a and b. So a I will initialize equal to 3, b is initialized with 4. So now I will call the function. I have already defined. I have defined this function. I have run this. Now I can call this function. I can use this function. This is how you use this function. But remember, this function requires two input arguments, a and b. I need not use x and y, because what is important here is I am passing just a value of these variables and not the variable name. So a will be mapped to x and b will be mapped to y. So a value is 3. Ultimately, when I am calling this function, so x will be equal to 3 and y will be equal to 4. So I can just run this function, and you can see that it determines the value of c, and also it prints it. So you get 18 as the value. So this is the function with input arguments. We'll go further. Now if you observe here in the same function which we created earlier, we have c here, we have x, and we have y. Now all these are assigned inside. They are known only inside the functions. They are called as local variables because c, x, y, these are actually assigned or defined inside the function. So they are known only within the function. For example, just to test this, let us say I will run this particular function and I will add one more cell. So let us say if I will run this eq and again, and already a comma b is already there, so I'm getting it. I will add one more cell. Now if I just click X, you can see that X is not defined, because X, Y, C, these are assigned inside the function, so they are called as the local variables. Okay, so they cannot be modified outside this particular function. But if you want to modify outside, then what you can do is you can make it as a global variable. Now similarly, let us say C. If I want to make it as a global variable, I can just add a statement called global space C. By doing this, I'll just again run it, and again I will just run it. So now if I, let us say C, so you can see that now C is known even outside, because I made it as global variable. And similarly, A and B, which you want to modify inside the function, you can also add this key statement global A, global B. So that way you will be able to modify inside. So global is again a reserved keyword in Python, and this is used to make a local variable into a global variable. So that is the second, so that is the that is about the variables. So local variables are actually assigned inside, and they can be modified only within that particular function, not outside the function. Whereas when a variable is called as a global variable, so this also can be modified even outside. The next one is, so there is something called as a documentation strings in functions. For example, I have defined the function and I want to give a kind of a documentation which will help the programmer to understand what exactly the function does. So I can add this documentation multi-line comment after the function definition statement. After the first line, I can, so like a triple quotation and quotation marks, and I can type the string, which is nothing but a documentation about this particular function. Let us say what it does is, and for example, this is how you type. It's actually different from a comment. Comment is basically, for example, this is a comment. It's a single line kind of a statement, that is string, whereas here this can have a multi-line comment. Now if you want to access or display this, if you want to display the documentation string or doc string we say, then you can also use a help command, help lin equation. So let me just run this, and I can just run. So you can see that the documentation gets displayed here. So you can also use another command here, which is called as lin equation dot doc. So this is how we can display this particular documentation string. To summarize this session, in this session we saw about function definition, function call. We also learned about passing input arguments to the function. We discussed about local and global variables and the document strings. So in the next session we will look at some more built-in functions, other than the built-in functions which we saw in the last session, and after that I will give an introduction to Python modules. Thank you.